to the other,
Yeah, so this is just, this is,
just replacing that one.
yeah, whatever got smashed up for you. Right at 6:30 and
Yep.
nearly follow.
And it is 6:30. So I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. The first order of business tonight is public hearing number 1. Are there any comments, oral or written, concerning the 2024 to 2025 school calendar,
The first hearing is for hours versus days, so this,
hours versus
so
days.
if we give the parameters of comments regarding an hours calendar versus a days calendar.
Mhm. So any comments, written or oral, to approve or concerning the 2024 to 2025 school calendar, specifically hours versus days? Okay. Having none, I'll call the public hearing number 1 adjourned. Okay, and next is public hearing number 2. I'm calling to order public hearing number 2. Any comments, oral or written, concerning the 2024 to 2025 academic school calendar? So this is about the calendar in general and dates.
I have 4 emails, I can read or summarize.
Okay,
So, I'm just gonna read them as they came into me. Just a question, can't we have online days instead of snow days, and why not? When we are faced with, we've always done it that way, do we ever wonder why or push the envelope? That's one comment. 2, I would highly recommend not starting on a Friday, that's hard on kids as they adapt to a new routine and families who are in need of childcare. Since centers usually go by week, please consider the first day of school a Wednesday, but still give us several days for teacher prep and some semblance of routine while still easing into a short week. In the same vein, I appreciate the way coming back from winter break is scheduled. It would be really rough to come in on that Friday for kiddos. And I think it's a great idea to give the teachers a day to prep. That's the second comment. Third comment, I was wondering if the calendar could be added to the Google Calendar and shared as public. It would help parenting from having to re-enter information. And so then the person goes on to explain how Google Calendars and how we can add. And we've done that with events calendar, but we haven't done it with days off calendar. So that's, and I totally got that comment. And then the last one was, thanks for sharing. It's a lot of work to create an accurate calendar. I appreciate it. My feedback is there are far too many colors on this, and the colors used are too similar and hard to read. For parents and students, there's at least an important distinction between actual holidays and vacation days. They're just days off. Same for teachers, comp days. It's no day of school like colors. And so then the person goes on to talk about how colors, if you're colorblind, it's hard to tell on colors, and you may not have a color printer at home. So like, I got that there was a little humor in like, okay, like we're gonna talk about colors, but it made me stop and think like we do it internally, so we know the difference between vacation and holidays, and we want people to know, oh, this is a teacher comp day. But at the end of the day, parents just need to know, are we sending our children to school or are we not sending them to school? So we could probably look at a calendar that we make internally and then just one that we publicize that has fewer colors. That makes sense. So, and then with regards to the start date, on that Friday, the 23rd, I kind of put that in my board notes, but that's by state law that we can't start before August 23rd, which was put in the same year they said, to make sure the state fair was over. And so there's a couple bills in the legislature rewording that. Instead of just picking August 23rd, they're saying maybe it could be the Tuesday after the state fair, which would allow us to start on August 20th. So, but since that law hasn't been passed into a bill, we're presenting the calendar as is.
Yeah, I checked on the status of that today and it appears to be dead. There hasn't been a hearing on it, so.
Well, that's too bad. So those are the comments that I got and just a little bit of background on those.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I guess the other comments I had from the teachers building leadership team, I can summarize those as they liked the Wednesday off before Thanksgiving. They appreciated the 2 weeks of Christmas and the asynchronous day. So I'm sorry, I could have added those before. Those were summaries from staff.
Yeah, this,
Any other?
I have nothing else to add. That's it. I promise. Well,
this is the perfect storm for having a long Christmas break.
yeah, when Christmas and New Year's are on Wednesday, you're not gonna go the Monday before the 23rd, and you're not gonna go to school on, probably not gonna go to school on January 3rd. So,
And having a short week for kids and especially for kids, but for staff too. For the first day of school really is a nice wake up call for students to realize, oh, I need to start going to bed earlier. I can do that over the weekend and start getting into the routine. So it works out pretty well, really.
I would agree and understand anytime you look at a calendar, everybody's got little suggestions and you're never gonna make a calendar that 100% works for everybody all the time, but, while I recognize one day maybe doesn't mean a lot, it does at least get you in a routine and you get to practice getting up and when you think about trying to fit everything in a tight window,
Yeah.
I want us to start on that Friday. It would be great if we could start a couple of days before, but that Friday for now.
Pass out computers, pass out books.
Yeah.
Ready to go
And we
on
can have
Monday.
more board discussion on that agenda item.
Okay,
So there will be plenty of time to discuss as a board. Are there any other comments from the public and present? Okay, so I'll call the public hearing adjourned and call to order the regular school board meeting. And with roll call, please note that all directors are present, with Director Petersburg being joining us digitally via Zoom. Okay, and Ron, do you mind reading the mission and value statement, please?
At Decorah Community School District, we embrace student learning and well-being as our fundamental purpose. We will, in partnership with our students, families, and community, make the world a better place. The mission of the Decorah Community School District is learning, thriving, creating our legacy. The vision of the Decorah Community School District is Decorah Community School District will be a collaborative, innovative, learning-centered organization, empowering students to embrace their personal strengths and create their future.
Thank you, Ron. Next, we'll move to old business, which is the second reading of Board Policy 401.5, Employee Records.
Second reading, the yellow highlighted parts were added by the state, by the Iowa Association of School Board to get us in compliant with the state law on employee records.
So the amended change is
Follows the state law.
Follows the state law.
It's a paragraph there in the second page, so speaks to employee resignation, termination, or discharge.
Mhm.
I move the approval for the second reading of Code 401.5 and 401.5R.
A second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Not here.
Pretty straightforward. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next, I'll ask for the approval of the agenda.
So moved.
I'll second that. Just to make sure I can be heard, so I'll second it.
You said it twice, so I'll give it to you.
Perfect. All right. Can you hear me okay? Seriously? Oh, yeah, thank you.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The agenda is approved. Next, the approval of consent items minus the January 8th and 31st, 2024. I did that again. Minutes. I did that last month too. Okay, so the consent items include the minutes from the meeting in January on the 8th and the 31st, bills, personnel. So take a sec to look those through.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion or questions? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next is open forum, which is communication from the public. And Birgitta Mead has signed up. Birgitta, thank you for joining us tonight. And as a reminder, I'm going to read the statement, just providing the parameters for public comments. It is the goal of the district to provide a guaranteed viable curriculum for every student in the Decorah Community School District. The open forum is set aside for the board to hear comments from the public. Comments are not limited to items or topics on the agenda, but are limited to matters within the board's authority and are not to exceed more than 3 minutes in length. As per Iowa code, the board cannot discuss matters not posted on the agenda. Please also remember comments are being made in a public forum. Any comments that are considered to be inflammatory or libelous may be subject to legal action. Okay, you can begin when you like.
Try not to be inflammatory.
Thank you. Thank you.
What a struggle. I do have a little bit of information for each of you, and I have sent you an email to let you know why I'm here. And Brian, can you see me if I stand over here?
Yep, I sure can. Perfect, thank you.
Send it to you. It's got links in it. So I'm here to ask you, well, first of all, I want to say thank you for what you do, because it's not easy. And also to congratulate you on the many years of work that it took to find the location for the new school, because that's quite an accomplishment. And I'm here to ask you to consider making the new school a net zero school, and I have some reasons for that. In case you don't know what net zero is, it means using the most modern technologies to reduce energy use by anywhere from 60 to 80%, and then offsetting the remaining energy use with renewables. And I think the most important thing for you to take away is that there have been big changes in just the last 2 to 3 years in terms of the technologies that are available and the money that is available to help you to implement that. First and foremost, a net zero school would be a healthy school. And there is plenty of scientific evidence that the kinds of technologies that would be used would increase student health and student educational outcomes. And I put a link in there to the EPA site to those science studies. Second of all, it's cost effective and it's financially responsible, both in the short term and the long term, to go to the net zero. There's a lot of money to help in the short term, even though the numbers can look kind of eye-popping to start with. But most importantly, in the long run, our district will save taxpayer dollars by going to net zero. As you know, our energy costs are one of the biggest costs after our staff costs. So it's important to look at that. The technologies are dependable. The Decorah School District is familiar with using geothermal at the high school. It's been going well from what Greg tells me. And so it's not something new and different. And the fourth one makes the Decorah District unique in the extraordinary amount of community experience that is ready, eager, and willing to help with this difficult job of planning the new school. And so I put in some links, okay? And I think that you can contact any of them, and then some resources to find out about other schools that have done this. So I know you can't comment on all this, but thank you for listening.
Thanks. Perfect.
Well, you time it just.
And you weren't scandalous.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure.
Okay. Are there any other public comments?
Good luck, everybody. Come on here.
Okay, so we'll move on to our next agenda item. And tonight we have a presentation from ELL teachers from the district. So welcome.
Thank you. Where would you like us to be?
You know what? the camera will pick you up and see you from where you are. So if you feel more comfortable standing or sitting, whatever, you'll be seen and heard.
All right, all right.
Well, thank you for taking time to listen to us this evening. My name's Catherine Moeller, and I do elementary ELL at John Klein and Carrie Lee.
And I'm Julie Peasy, and I work with our middle school and high school English learners. And our main goal for English learners is to provide a safe spot for them. Like they come in, so they're not completely overwhelmed when things aren't in their first language. And we help with English at their level.
Like Julie mentioned, so ELL stands for English Language Learners. I'm just gonna give a little background of how we determine ELL status in the district. It's gonna be pretty brief. So first of all, every student who registers for school does a home language survey. If there's a language other than English on that survey, then Julie or I will screen the student to see what their language proficiency is. So we give students a screener and then as needed, a summative test. And if students show that they aren't proficient in the areas of reading, writing, listening, or speaking, then they are served as ELL students. We have something called a LAU plan, which is a legal document that all districts have that describes this a little bit more in detail, and it's on our district website. So if you're ever interested, you can take a look.
And we want to talk about who our students are. They're people who don't speak English as their first language, and sometimes they're called multilingual learners too, and it's because they can speak more. Like I was surprised this year when we had a high school student who we thought her first language was Spanish, but that was her second language, and her first language was a tribal language from Guatemala. And so it's fascinating. And she's like, I feel like she's learning Spanish. We're trying to help her a little bit with some Spanish resources, and we realized that wasn't the right approach because Spanish is hard for her. These are students who are families who might have lived here their whole lives, but still speak another language as their first language, or they might be brand new to the country. Currently we have students besides Guatemala, like I mentioned, lots of Spanish speaking countries, Mexico, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, and then we also have students from China and South Korea. So there's so much culture there, and we feel like the world comes to us for this and they add such a cultural wealth to our classrooms.
So our current number of students we serve, at the elementary, there are 23 English language learners. Between the middle and high school, there are 15. About 5 years ago, there were 15 ELL students in the spring. Now we have 38 in the district. So it's definitely a population that is growing.
And we're going to talk about a little bit about what we do. So we teach both the social language of English and the academic. And we really work with classroom teachers. We try to collaborate. And me at the middle school and high school, I mean, today I had a meeting with the middle school teacher who said, how can I reach this student who only speaks Spanish, who is new this year? And the next 6 weeks, we're working on this project. And we talk about how that can still work, even though we only speak Spanish right now, and they're at the middle school level. Or, I mean, imagine going into high school and not knowing a single bit of English. You know, they're learning, hi, how are you? And my name is, but they're also expected to be up to grade level to some means. But we're there to say it's okay if you're not up to grade level. If we have a chart that if you're on the test you're talking about, place a level 1, then here's what you can do at a level 1. And it's okay. So we say it to teachers, you can have a modified report card. You can be pass fail, for example. But those conversations are fun to have with teachers. But I mean, that's a lot for the two of us to talk to all of them, but I do enjoy that part of the job. We also talk with guidance counselors, and some of these students, I mean, it's their goal their whole lives to make it to the US, but they get here and it's overwhelming and they're sad and they're trying to work through those feelings, and sometimes they can't even talk to their family about it because they're supposed to be here and be happy. Also with the guidance counselors, looking at the transcripts that are perhaps in Spanish, for example, and we help interpret them and say, here's what they had, here's what can maybe count cross-reference as classes and talk about their current year, what classes they should be in, and also, do they want to go to college? And is it going to be in their home country or is it going to be here?
So we work with students in small groups, practicing their language skills. We also push into classrooms to support them and the teachers in academics as well. We do testing. We serve as testing proctors for our respective schools for fast testing, ISAPs, MAPs. We do the ALPA, so the language proficiency assessment every year. We also help communicate with families about their wants and needs. For example, we had some new students in December that came, and we wanted to make sure they had snow gear. So we're doing that stuff as well. A big task we also do is set up interpreters for parent-teacher conferences every fall and late winter, spring.
And this year we've had 14 newcomers. So a newcomer is somebody who is new to the country or the schooling experience in the US. And their level on those tests would be emerging. And it's tough to have that many newcomers, but for them and for us, everyone feels it, but our job is to make them feel welcome day one. And sometimes it's tricky because there's 2 of us in 4 buildings. So we've had times this year that there was 3 of the buildings had newcomers. So we have to figure out how to spread us out. But when they come, we schedule a tour, and a meeting with the families. An interpreter usually needs to be involved. We figure out, lunch and then I walk the students through the lunch line and figure out how to do that the first couple days. My high school students, most of them haven't used the locker, so that's fun to figure out. Or the bus system, as a parent, like going over to Carrie Lee and seeing the transfer bus, I was like, whoa, that's tricky for me. And I'm a native speaker of English. So we try to help the families. Like the high school student connects with the John Klein student at Carrie Lee, and they're both asking about their sibling. And we're like, we'll get you there, we promise. Just the whole schedules, meeting them there and serving all levels of our English learners and the growing population. It's been a challenge. We're working through it, but lots of newcomers this year.
And we expect our ELL population to continue to grow. Families are becoming more connected to the area. Some have been here for a longer time, and so then relatives start to come. Postville this year so far has had 118 newcomers, and so some of these families eventually disperse and move into our community. Recently, Howard Winnesheek hired a new teacher, and they've had 10 newcomers this year. So this is a trend in all area schools, an increase in the ELL population.
I think we're here to say we love what we do. We're going to continue doing it, but we want to make sure we have time to teach. There's a lot of liaison work in our job that we like, but it spreads us a little bit thin. And we want to teach all levels, because when newcomers come, we give them our all, but then we still have our existing English learners, and we even monitor our exited students after 2 years. But we look forward to serving them all. So we appreciate you listening.
I would just jump in with a couple. I think our principals here, I hear from probably one a week or one a month about what are we doing for our EL population, because it seems to kind of be growing. I don't want to say exploding, but just to kind of review those numbers. We were in the spring of 2016, we were at 22, and now we're going to be at 38. So we do see our population growing. What I can tell you as being a principal of the ELL attendance center in Cedar Rapids, where they would bus the children in, that's a real tough thing for a teacher to have all of a sudden students who you don't know if they're picking up anything, and it's just tough to but I do this and I don't know if they're getting it, and that's a part of that makes that process difficult for it's stressful on the system, I guess is what I'm saying. But in a good way, because they're here and they want to learn. we talked about having newcomers and that requires a lot of time and energy. So, before I came to Decorah, I wouldn't have guessed that we would have had a population that had this many ELL students, just because I knew Decorah from mostly growing up, and clearly it's changing, and Northeast Iowa is getting more and more students, but this could be something that we can revisit with the board at a later time as well. But the opportunity to have a presentation about ELL and make sure the board was aware of the ELL services, so I would stop and open it up for any questions that folks might have.
I have a question. So there's two of you. You said that you're floating around between 4 buildings. What is do you have identified staff that can be a physical presence in your absence if you're tied up somewhere else, to that the students know, or what happens when you're not able to be in 2 places at once?
I would say at the high school, there are a couple Spanish speaking resources. I have not found as many at middle school, but there's really strong grade level teams I found out at the middle school and there is some para support, not identified specifically for ELL, but I let them know when I'm going to be gone and here's how you can support them. And they do a pretty good job, but I was gone for a few days, a couple weeks back, and those delay days, I mean, I create a new schedule in Spanish for my students because once again, this is my first year in the district. Learning the middle school and high school schedules, I think people realize that has been difficult for me. There's some teachers that have been wonderful to help me out, but once again, that's in my first language. So when I was gone, I wasn't expecting the delay days, and they happened, and so I was emailing people for my trip and saying, this, my students are emailing me, and then when I got back, like, they lit up like relief, like, oh, there's someone here. Because everyone did their best, and they'll get through the day, and everyone's willing to help, it's just hard, you know, like, I happen to know, I don't have to know Spanish, but I happen to know Spanish, so it helps a bit. But there's not a good backup, but, I mean, it's just being humane to someone, if you know, when we're gone, so.
Definitely office staff, administrators, para, John Klein, who can speak Spanish. They usually step in if I can't be there.
I just can't imagine how hard it is for you guys to take care of, that many the population you have with different, speaking different languages. Let's see, for instance, somebody came from, spoke Chinese, and you need an interpreter. Where would you get that interpreter from? Is Luther College helping us out with some of those problems that might arise?
Currently, no. I know like last year we looked into an online like language line for Somali, and we ended up not having to use it, but so that was an option last year.
One of the things, obviously one of the best interpreters is the child at some point level, because they can interpret, but I sat at a few parent conferences and I thought, what's stopping this child from saying to mom and dad, Tim's doing great in school and he should be rewarded. But usually I think,
You try to get somebody else.
yeah, you try to get somebody.
And it works for a few families, but not all. Right.
Does the AA provide any resources?
I think that'd be good. Yes.
For ELL or for translating?
Translation.
Does he work? No, he's, yeah. I don't know if they would pay for like a language.
Yeah.
Like,
So
I don't know, that's a great question.
Haven't
so
you,
Russ gets paid, if it's for the AEA, he would get paid by the AEA, but, for us, they get paid by us.
right, but I'm wondering, could he be a resource, because hasn't he been?
I think
He will attend IEP meetings, yep, and then we pay him because it's for a Decorah student, but if it's a AEA service, outside of, maybe, early childhood, so early access, prior to 3 years old, then AEA would pay him.
Yeah, so right now we have a good amount of interpreters we can use for like conferences, but you're right, they are mainly Spanish speaking, so we would. right now, our students, at least my students from Korea, know enough English that they don't need an interpreter, but we would need to brainstorm. Other than-
We really appreciate all that you do. I'm sure you are just, have busy, busy days every day.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
I'll echo Carol's thoughts. My last teaching position was in Madison, Wisconsin, and Verona, which is also Fitchburg. So my classroom itself was 50-50 English language learners and native speakers. So I understand the challenges you're facing and greatly appreciate the work you're doing.
Yeah, thanks for being here tonight.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is new business. First is the approval of the 2022-2023 audit, and we have a professional here from Hacker Nelson Accounting. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I think you've all got electronic copies, is that correct, Kathy? And I want to make sure I do say that we had very good cooperation from Kathy and Darlene and the rest of the staff, as always. And so that's greatly appreciated. They're quite helpful and well organized, so that goes well. Again, I'm not going to go through this entire document. Don't want to get thrown out of here. Whatever the term was Darlene used. So anyway, so the 2023 audit, it's an unmodified opinion, which means that it's a clean opinion. There's no problems. You're meeting professional standards as far as the presentation of financial statements. It was a single audit, which means you spent more than $750,000 of federal dollars, which requires us then to do extra testing in 1 or 2 programs. And so this year we looked more in depth in at the school nutrition funds, which entail eligibility and also purchasing to make sure that you're meeting federal guidelines, which there were no problems that we noted. Again, it had good cooperation, the records were fine. We didn't find any errors or anything that was out of line. So again, we confirm the money that comes in, we compare that to ticket counts and so on to make sure it looks reasonable, that obviously that your number of kids who are eating lunch, and especially ones who are eating paid either free or reduced amounts, is reasonable based on student population, things like that. In the front of this is the manager's discussion analysis. It's about 9 pages. Again, I won't go through all that. If you only want to read that, that is very important as far as a good summary of the financial. And you're in the school district is in good financial condition. Your ability to spend, you're not limited as far as budget, you're doing well. Of course, the biggest thing we always worry about is enrollment, because fewer students mean fewer dollars. If you're down about 19 students, 19 or 20 students, so that, again, some of the other schools we audit, they'd be more than happy to be only down that much. So you're in good shape there. There's one new standard this year. People write accounting rules, often come up with new ways to make us do other things. So because you have a 3-year contract for an IT subscription, which I believe is for the videoing, streaming athletic events, we have to put that on as being an asset and a liability. So that's in there. That's really the only change from the prior year. If you look in, make a note, page 53 is comparative to the last 10 years, governmental funds, the income and expenses. Again, interesting, one thing I will note and comment on is that if you look at that 10-year comparative, you'll note that the AEA money hasn't changed a whole lot in 10 years. So the dollars that is being spent or flowing through the AEA is really consistent. So, you know, I'm not trying to be inflammatory or anything. I'm just noting.
Good luck with that.
Did have a couple comments. As usual, there's some issues with segregation of duties because you have a rather small staff doing the financial records. And we didn't find any serious problems, but again, the biggest thing is always board oversight, reviewing where the money is going, making sure that money looks like it's coming in. And again, probably the big issue we run into is the student activity funds, because oftentimes there's one or two teachers who handle that fund itself. And so handling fundraising or those type of things. And so we always make a selection of those and look to see if things look reasonable and money's going in the right place. But again, that's important. The budget, we had a comment on the budget. Basically, did not budget enough for the transfers. There's no consequences of that. We just made note of that. But a couple disbursements that didn't have purchase orders. Again, it's gotten better over time. I know Kathy tries to enforce that as best she can. But people will be people. Hard to be perfect. You know that. And there's one entity you paid that appears should have gotten a 1099 at the end of your report their income. And they did not receive one. There's a number of others who did, so he's made note of that. So those are kind of the only findings we had. Kathy, did you send them the graphs with that? If you can open those, we'll look at those. I think those often are better than looking at numbers for most of us who don't deal with numbers all day. So the first graph is comparison of the general fund revenues. At least in my group and district, a couple comments. You'll note that the local revenue is pretty constant the last 4 years. State revenue also. So the really only variable has been the federal dollars. Everything else has been pretty consistent from year to year. The next graph just talks about the breakdown of the general fund revenue. And again, pretty even between local revenue, which is mainly property taxes, and the state revenue. And federal revenue is less than 5% last year. And again, as we ended up spending down the ARPA money, we're going to see that probably decrease as well, unless, depending on what the Fed's read. The next graph is general fund expenditures. Again, some slight increases. Actually, 22 to 23 were actually down about 300,000 in the prior year. And the next graph just breaks down the expenditures in general fund. Again, just the comment, as most schools are, you're about 76% is people cost, salaries and fringe benefits. And virtually all schools now are going to be between 70 and 80%. That's just how it runs. So you're right at where you should be. So, and then as far as the financial solvency ratio, you're down slightly from the last couple of years, but again, you're still almost at 16%. So, and again, the goal is you want to be well above 6, and so you're over 16, right at 16. So you're again very good financial shape. And then the last graph is the spending, or next to last graph is spending authority. And that's down somewhat in the prior year, but you're still at 3.5 million. So you're not in bad shape. And then the final graph is the student enrollment, which I addressed early. And again, you're fairly constant, but again, you'd like to see that increase, but questions or comments? And that's rather brief. I don't think I made 3 minutes, but
You have more than 3 minutes,
Okay.
if you wish.
But I will answer any questions you might have or comments.
Yeah, I'm really impressed that with such a small staff, we're able to do all that we do to give Packer Nelson the information that they need and to make sure that our processes are in place. The separation of duties, Kathy, is there anything that can be achieved here or with school staff to make that a stronger process?
Probably the only thing would be an additional staff person just to move things around,
Right.
segregate those duties a little bit more.
99% of our audits have the same comment.
Yeah, that's good to know.
It's-
Yeah.
it's-
Thanks for
it's
sharing.
Yeah.
tough. And again, oftentimes it's smaller things, like I mentioned, the student activity funds or something where there's probably a bigger concern because there's oftentimes non-financial people handling those things and trusted with whether. And again, I think you've done some things with such as ticketing athletic events, going to non-cash and those things which make it less of an opportunity for someone to do something they shouldn't. And again, what we're trying to do is keep honest people honest.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that the electronic ticketing portions that, from being involved with the Girls Athletic Union, that it's been a real important step forward logistically. And yet, there's a bill in the legislature to abolish it. So there are always people who are gonna complain about any sort of progress, but I'm sure that this is a major benefit from a financial security perspective.
The graphs were very helpful. Thank you for providing that, and it's helpful for us to, I mean, this is.
Well, I know if I start going over numbers, oftentimes people maybe lose interest or don't focus as much as, and so it's easier. And again, I appreciate what you folks do, because it's not an easy job, and I think the board and the staff, so.
It's helpful to see a graph of enrollment trends as well. So the graph that we're looking at is from 2021 through 2024, and it is sloping down. And that's obviously the school district's main source of revenue, so that's important for the public to know. Any other questions or comments?
I just want to say how much we appreciate Kathy and all that you do and how particular you have to be and that you are on everything that you do. So, thank you.
Yeah, Kathy, do you have any comments about the final report of the audit?
No, we tried our best to make sure that we're getting all the paperwork. I know I hound a lot of these people and
She has to.
I've been trying to figure out who charged a tarp at Norby's and I cannot figure out the signature. It's driving me nuts.
Well, thank you for all you do.
And just to that point, we had you noted 3 times that people had purchased things without prior consent, and that's certainly something that, as I kind of look into the administrators in the room, we do bring that up occasionally and just need your guys' help on that, because that, obviously Kathy can't enforce that, so.
Anyway, we did look in, from what we could see, what was being purchased in that, and we didn't see anything that looked out of line or unusual, but again, it's policy you're trying to enforce.
Yeah, that doesn't mean that somebody went out and bought something inappropriate, they just needed it and they got it, and it was just a matter of making sure that you follow the procedure. Exactly.
Again, if you look through things, if there are questions or comments, please call me or send me an email. You ask my email. We'd be glad to get back to you if someone has something or wants more explanation.
And we want to thank you for your team that always comes in too. They're very professional and well, they keep us hopping.
Okay, so this does need formal approval by the board.
I'll make a motion to approve the 2022-2023 audit report.
I'll second.
Okay, there's a motion and second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thanks again for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is the approval of the 2024 to 2025 type of school calendar, hours versus days.
I can go in for as long as you'd like, but I recommend, and we built a calendar based on hours versus days. Gives you more flexibility in scheduling, and if you have to make up, you're not locked into make up full days. And we think the calendar has a cushion of 22 hours right now. That's we're going to vote on next, and that gives you a little bit of cushion for late starts or no school days. But of course, we're recapturing those late start hours
I
now
know, that's good.
with virtual. So we're saving those up in case we need to catch them in for a day or two of snow day that might go after Memorial Day. But we may not even have any more snow days.
Oh, you had to go and say,
Yeah.
As soon as I said it, I knocked. As soon as it was coming out of my mouth, I was getting my knuckles ready to knock on wood, but, yeah, that probably is my fault. So, but if the board has any questions, the hours calendar, it just is flexible for us.
And just for review, this has been the first school year that we've been on the hours versus day schedule. Is that correct?
I think this is about third or fourth.
Yeah.
Not the first.
It's not.
So,
Okay.
and I believe there's only 3 or 4 schools that are on days, right? That are left on days. Not very many.
Yeah, I don't know. I know Decorah and maybe Linmar were the last two that I kind of knew
Mhm.
and that I followed. This went into effect. We started the governor did two things. It was Governor Branstad. We started the school start date was August 23rd. And at the same time, you had the option of picking hours versus days. So people looked at it, it was like, well, if we start August 23rd, how are we gonna get in? And then that's when the governor also said, well, just go with an hours calendar. So my guess is those first couple of years, you folks probably went pretty close to June if you had a day's calendar.
Yes, we
Yeah.
did.
Oh, yeah, it's ended the second week of June a few
Yes.
years ago.
Yeah.
Yes, we did.
This is a big improvement.
Yeah.
And being able to do virtual learning on those late 2-hour late starts is a big improvement this year too.
Mhm.
well, I'll make a motion to continue to operate on the basis of hours.
I will second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And next is approval of the 2024-25 academic school calendar. And Dr. Cronin, would you like to walk us through just the highlights?
Sure, just the
of
highlights.
this?
Starts Friday, August 23rd, as we discussed at the beginning. That's based on the state law. It has the Wednesday, late starts. We, put, conference week is first full week in November, and we put a teacher PD day on that Friday. With the idea that the teacher comp day for those 2 nights at conferences, we really like putting that Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And that was, well received when it was presented to the district leadership team. So, that's made up of teachers. So we know that was super helpful. And that's kind of a good day to put an off day, for families who may want to travel or something. We kind of discussed already as well, Christmas and New Year's both fall on Wednesdays, which just kind of makes it almost guarantees that your school district's gonna have 2 full weeks. We have the January 3rd as a teacher PD day. Looking at that being another asynchronous day. We tried that this year for the first time when we came back on January 2nd. And the idea with that was, we had some PD put together. And teachers, if they completed it ahead of time, then that became a day off for them. And that was another thing that was well received by staff, and they felt like they'll get the learning done on their own, and then they have the day off on January 3rd, just kind of fit nicely. Then you roll into second semester. By contract, we're required to provide 3 breaks: a Thanksgiving break, a Christmas winter break, and a spring break. So I guess our spring break is April 18th and the 21st, which I have to smile because I grew up in Iowa City and spring break was always a week long. But I know we don't do that here. And then we finish on Thursday, May 22nd. And that is just one day before the Memorial Day break. And that's why, unless if Ron's accurate and we're not going to pass the law, then we could potentially look at, next year, probably having more than one snow day and having to do something around after Memorial Day, which isn't the end of the world, but I just know I value the learning days before Memorial Day more than I do afterwards. So, and we can always revisit that as a board, and we could, I think we'll maybe look at this calendar 1 or 2 more times, but that's the calendar. And obviously, like I said ahead of time, maybe when we publish it for the community, we'll tone down the use of colors, so
Yeah,
that,
that's a good point. Internal versus
yeah,
external
yeah.
information.
Yeah, the one thing I think would be useful color on that is not only showing days when there is school, but days when we are scheduled to have off, but that are the contract days, to indicate to people, you can count on this as a day off. You can't count on this as a day off, like the Monday after Easter is,
Oh, okay.
but in the past has been, people said, well, gee, I planned a vacation on that. Well, that one's not guaranteed. The rest of them are. So.
Sure.
Is that true? That one's,
Well, technically, I guess the comment is
Yeah.
that it says vacation periods. We wouldn't do that unilaterally. We would, as we did last year, have a discussion with the association on whether it was feasible. And if you remember last year, we were looking at trying to recapture one of those days, and a couple people had plans made, and
Yeah.
we decided not to do it.
mhm.
So, so it is kind of tough. I get what Ron's saying, but when you put a day off and, people are buying plane tickets and planning
Right, makes it
vacations, and
tough, yeah.
it does make it a little difficult to try to recapture that. So, but I mean, based on this calendar, knowing that we'd have some snow days, we may revisit our virtual discussion as well. So.
And I would suggest that if by freak of nature, that law is passed, that we would reserve the right
Oh.
to revisit.
Yeah, if
Start
the,
early.
if the law gets passed, if we're allowed to start on August 20th, the Tuesday after the state fair, I would probably bring it back the next month for board review.
Any further discussion? And this will need board approval.
I'll make a
Okay.
motion. But go ahead, Carol. No, go ahead.
Go ahead, Ryan.
I'll make a motion that we approve the school calendar as presented.
And I'll second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Excuse me, opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next is the first reading of code 405.2, licensed employee qualifications, recruitment and selection.
And this is a very simple but important change, and that is, we cited we said we would post all jobs on Teach Iowa, which doesn't exist anymore as a required state website. Now you have to post jobs on Iowa Works. And so we're just gonna draw a line through that and say posting on the online state job posting system, because we don't know if it'll change again, and that's required by law that we use that site. It doesn't mean we can't use other resources, but we have to put our jobs on Iowa Works.
In all seriousness, I wonder if we could just do something that will stand the test of time. Is it possible to say we will post it on whatever is required by the
Oh,
state of
that's what
Iowa?
I tried to do this. I just tried to change the wording to posting on the online job system.
Yeah. I
So
mean,
generic.
if they
like-
change the,
Yeah.
name again, we don't wanna have to.
Yeah, I didn't put Iowa Works in, I just on the
Yeah,
online
okay, good.
system, so I was thinking the same thing, like, let's just say we'll post it on whatever's required. And I could probably tweak that language a little bit more, but yeah, I just tried to have it be, represent,
Yeah,
not a specific, website, cause yeah, it could change next year.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. We'll need an approval for this first reading.
I'd move approval of the first reading of 405.2.
I will second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
I,
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries. Next is approval of Decorah School District Special Education Service Delivery Plan for 2024.
And do we do this every 5 years?
Yep, it's approved every 5 years, it's required, and we're required to have a plan in place, so we met a couple different times. It was posted for the public to make comments on as well. We didn't have any comments. There was a team of teachers that got together, some gen ed, some special ed, AEA staff, a parent, and we met to kind of review things. We didn't make a whole lot of changes. I would say the changes really were just technical in nature and just changing some wording, kind of updating some things in that sense. We did add one blurb about other options for programming if we look outside of Decorah, if we need to do that. One of them being Lansing. They have a school there that we are sending students who have talked about in other meetings, you know, just in case we need to send students to that therapeutic classroom setting. And not that we couldn't send them if there was another classroom that opened up in the next 5 years. This is you know, available, or this is the plan for the next 5 years. But just kind of listing that, you know, these are some of the options, things that we are using or considering, so.
And about page 9 and 10, this document is the caseload monitoring part that gets used a lot by districts. And that's kind of just an informal check to be able to say, oh, this teacher's load is a full load, or this load is a 3/4 load.
And that's what we looked at last year when we added the special ed teacher at the high school, you know, because everybody's caseloads were really, really, you know, strained and then beyond that 25 points. So that's something that we look at every year. And as we plan for the following year, how we're gonna, you know, make up staffing and where students are placed.
It's nice to have an objective rubric.
It
like
is,
that.
yes, and it's required, so. But that is something that has been tweaked over the years. We actually didn't really make any tweaks to that this time around, so I was pleased that teachers didn't feel like we needed to make a change in that.
Mhm.
And it's outside your purview, but it'd be excellent if we had one of these for ELL.
Yeah, oh, they're not hearing about
They're
it,
not
yeah.
It just kind of, because I was like, as I was listening to him a week ago, I was like, oh gosh, we need to have a caseload monitoring so we can really say.
Yeah.
And just kind of like with ELL, IEPs, there are certain students that just require more time and energy, and that's all baked into the formula.
It's not perfect, but it's a place to start.
Exactly.
It has to be board approved.
Yes,
All right.
thank you. It has to be board approved. So any other questions before we?
I will move to approve the DCSD Special Education Service Delivery Plan for 2024 and going forward.
I will second.
Okay, there's a motion and second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thanks for all the hard work you put into that. And next is approval of the revised agreement to establish a consortium to jointly administer an instructional program at the Decorah Crossroads site.
So we approved this last month and we needed to add in Postville. And so we added in Postville. So we're just bringing this back with one more school district on there.
Is it nice though?
Let's say that.
That was Postville. Could be, we added a school district that we didn't have last week, and we added them at the bottom.
Riceville's the one.
Okay, it's Riceville. Thanks, Kathy.
Got the last 5 letters.
She is efficient, isn't she?
Yeah. I'm sure Sean can edit that so that it says Riceville when on the archive tape.
Do we need to pass this again?
Yeah, we need to pass it with Riceville on there.
I move that we pass the revised agreement to establish a consortium for Crossroads with the additional school of Riceville.
All right, so there you go.
I'll second that.
Oh, Aaron got in.
Good job, Aaron.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next is to review and potential approval of a staff request from full-time to part-time.
So we had a staff member write us a letter, wishing to explore the option to go part-time. And that letter's included in here. I put down some criteria by which I would think that we would want to have, some parameters for allowing people to go part-time. They're not a lot, but, I'd start with, I'd want the building administrator or supervisor to agree that the person could go half-time. I think there's a keen part that, you have to look at it by grade level and subject. Some things are easier to share and other things are not. We can't do this to, increase FTE or costs. So insurance and benefits would be another concern. And then probably the last, one of the most important ones would be, that we can find a suitable replacement. I had really good success. No, I only had it once, but I had good success in Cedar Rapids. The rule was if you found somebody to share a classroom with, you could just do it. And I had two ladies share a second grade classroom, which would not be my thought of a good grade level or subject to do it. But they did it. They found each other. They were super dedicated. We probably got about 65% out of each one of them. We had a kind of a built-in sub for that room. The children adapted, I had no complaints, but would I say to Rick or Dana, hey, I think it's a great idea to share an elementary classroom teacher and the children will go to lunch and come back and they'll have a different adult in their room? Absolutely not. But that did work for me. This one is a PE. That probably is a little bit easier to share, but I think this is a bigger decision. I know talking to Ron, maybe we've approved it sometimes and other times we haven't. And so wanted to have this discussion with the board and make sure they kind of knew where I was coming from and get some guidance before we got too far ahead on doing something like this.
I appreciate you laying out some criteria to consider in making this decision, because as much as we want to support and retain teachers, we need to be realistic about managing a district. And I'm thinking that each circumstance is going to be different, and we can't make a one size fits all for everybody, but I appreciate the opportunity to approve case by case situations. With this criteria in mind, have you talked with building administrators about this criteria
This one,
before this board meeting?
well, with this criteria, we looked at it at our meeting last week, but it was a 3-hour meeting, so I can't say that everybody memorized it, but we talked a little bit about that. With this one in particular, we kind of even looked at what it might look like for a special schedule. So, but I would let Rick or Dana speak to sharing PE with two different people. I mean, maybe talk a little bit about the situation.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the elementary, the way it currently resides with the building separation, we've got morning at John Klein, afternoon at Carrie Lee, sort of a natural break in that. So that's definitely would be something. We currently have that with music already. That happened several years ago, and that was due to actually a request, but it was kind of a circumstance at the time. I'm bringing back a little history, sorry, but that happened to be where there were some medical things that tied into it, and then that kind of got that started. In my mind, there's, going back to the retention and how can we recruit, how can we retain good people and keep them in our system as long as we can. This one particularly, when we start just talking about, there are differences, but it makes sense to me. There's a lot of benefits there. I think, again, you get 2 part-time people, as you said, a lot of times they're going to put in 65%. So you're really getting above the roof of what you're getting on 100%. No offense to our people that work full-time,
But,
that definitely is something you look at, so, and again, the separation, because it is like building here, you really could concentrate on just, K1, 2, next building could be just concentrate on 3, 4. Yeah, sure, those two teachers are gonna wanna connect and, with the horizontal and vertical grade level stuff along, just like PLCs with the rest of the, physical education staff, but again, it makes sense. I don't know if Dana has anything else, but.
My only concern is that we still have PE for preschool and TK.
Yeah.
They don't quite fit into that.
Yeah.
I second that.
And those are variables that we know right now, that we've told this last several years that we've always, and that's always been a revolving door. And right now, time does not allow them to fit into that current schedule when we are, the size we are, where we're traditionally, 5 sections across the board. Schedule's kind of built that way that there's just no more hours left after you get through 5 grade levels of the elementary.
So currently we have 1.2 full-time equivalent PE at the elementary level.
With the pre-K.
Yes.
Yeah, the thing that I think is important about this is, as we've discovered from other contexts, to emphasize very clearly on the record that the intent of this is not to set a precedent. In other words, the next time someone wants to, pursue a part-time position, they can't come and say, well, you allowed this before, so you have to allow it again. These are all on an ad hoc basis. Like in this case, it makes sense, but I wouldn't, for example, support, splitting a second grade classroom. Or even, if we've got 5 sections of algebra 2, I don't think it would be good if we had different people teaching it. I think the continuity would be important to maintain. So, I support this, but not as any type of a precedent that people want to come back with next time.
And
Go ahead.
go ahead, Rob.
No, I just gonna say I completely agree with Ron that we can't let this agreement and the qualifications that you have get watered down in any way, because it surely could be a situation that it's something we get in a situation going forward that didn't work out or doesn't work out, and then we have to back out of it and might not be good. We got to always. I know it's hard to find teachers, but we gotta be pretty firm with when this does make sense and when it doesn't.
I think that was the last bullet point. I didn't really stress that but the administration, and I guess you could say the administration board reserves the right to review this practice each time. And so that could be one of the things where we just know that I'll always bring it to the board as I get these requests. After, we won't have posted a job necessarily, but we could, the building principal could bring it to me and say, hey, this person wants to go half time. I could support it if we find a suitable replacement, and then we can bring it to the board at the next board meeting. If we're comfortable with that, because I do, as much as this has worked for me in the past, and I could see folks at different parts in their career, either if they've got children at home, this could be a benefit. If they've got young children at home, this could be a benefit, or if they've got older parents that they need to support.
Right.
But I also fully appreciate what Ron's saying is we have to kind of guard it, and we can't get a district where we've just got a bunch of part-time folks.
Okay, so this is.
In this situation, sorry. In this situation, would each of the teachers have a paid prep time at the individual schools? They wouldn't be expected to teach without a prep time, would they?
But in my research, we've prorated the prep time. So if you're a 20% teacher, then we give you 20% of the prep time.
And a prep time is 30 minutes?
That's now my next favorite part of this research was I looked for a definition of what prep time is, and we just guarantee it, but it's interesting. It's different in each building. It's not defined. But in general, I would say every other district I've worked in, it says duty-free prep of 30 minutes or 35 minutes, but in Decorah, it's undefined. It's defined basically by building, by when a period is that you have that you don't teach. So I would think at a minimum, it's 30 minutes.
So going back, current practice and the examples we gave right now, we have those times allotted. Again, I think this all comes back to, again, what is you know, every circumstance is a little different because this is different than a classroom teacher. You know, when you're teaching grade level at different stages and things, but I think we have those things in place. I think there's always, you know, things we need to continue to look at. Like I said, we've always, for the last, I don't even know how long have we had our preschool program, I guess was probably going back when that came into play. We've always had this piece of, okay, we don't have enough PE basically for our elementary when we put in the TK programs and the West Side early childhood programs. So that's always been, for the last 10 years, been kind of an outlier, and we filled it with multiple people from high school PE teachers to St. Benedict's currently, St. Benedict's, you know, PE teacher. And sometimes we were filling it in with just other odds and ends over the years, I remember. But those are all things we gotta keep in mind. And in my mind, when you look at that schedule, right, what is the prorate, how much time can they fit, how do we prorate them to make sure they get a prep? And how does that work out mathematically with full-time position? You know, if you're dividing it into two.
So if we want quality instruction for these students,
Right.
then they need to have time.
They have the prep time built in.
Yeah, paid
Absolutely.
prep time.
Yeah, time to make sure they're preparing and within that contract to make sure they're ready to go for the time they're allowed. I agree, 100%. So,
So this is on our agenda as a review and potential approval.
I move that we approve the request, subject to the ability to find a suitable halftime replacement, and with the understanding that this does not set any sort of precedent.
And maybe it doesn't, the building administration's okay with it and it doesn't increase our costs.
Yeah. Well, that's the factors which allow us to.
Okay, awesome.
Can I just clarify a little bit?
Yeah.
Great point, but just wording there with that, the way it was said, halftime, part-time. Right now, again, the difference is John Klein has 3 grade levels. Cary Lee does not, they have 2. So mathematically, right now, the contract reads as is, going back to what we got in place with music, for example, it's like 62% and 38%.
Yeah.
So the 50-50, just making sure I'm clarifying that in this case, the example would be that. So suitable replacement, but just not that it would be 50-50, I guess.
What he said.
I think that's well clarified on Rick's part. I will second the staff request to move from full-time to part-time with all the addendums.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any further questions or discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries. Okay, next on our agenda is the approval of the ISL continued participation resolution and to set a public hearing.
When Kathy and I go to budget meetings, one of the things they remind you is don't let your PEPAL or your instructional support levies expire. Ours doesn't expire until, excuse me, our ISL doesn't expire until 2026, but we are allowed to approve it, extend it now, which we're gonna recommend as it's top of mind, and we don't wanna put that off. What this requires, if you look in the document from Allers and Cooney, they get to about page 2, and we need 2 meetings to do this. We're gonna complete, we're recommending that we extend the instructional support levy for 5 years. And so we're just gonna make a resolution to consider participation in the instructional support program at our next meeting, and then we'll schedule a public hearing, because you have a public hearing that says you're going to do that. And then we put the notices in the paper. This instructional support levy is something we've had forever. I don't know, not forever, but for a while. Kathy, I don't know when we started. Okay,
That's over 17 years.
okay. So we're just continuing a levy that the district's had for 17 years, but making sure that we don't forget to do it.
Is this extended for 5 years beyond 26 or 5?
Yeah, so it'll go 27 and then 5 years from there. So I guess it'll end in 32. So. Yeah.
Okay, so we need to consider approving the ISL, continued participation. And then if that is approved, then we can set a public hearing.
Yeah, so.
Or are there already recommended dates for the public hearing?
Well, the public hearing would be, at our next meeting, the March 11th. And then we've got to get that in the paper between the 10 and 20 days, no more than 10 days before and no more than 20 days. So Darlene is right on top of that, and they've got documents in there for her to put in the paper. In fact, one of those is here. But so what you'd say is if the board's, wants to approve continued participation, that would be a vote, and then let's schedule the public hearing for March 11th at 5:30 or 6:30? At 5:30 on March 11th. And we'll be good to go.
The motion can just say to adopt the resolution.
Okay. So I'll wait for a motion to adopt the resolution.
I move that we adopt the resolution to continue participation in the ISL levy and to set public hearing as.
I noticed, I think Brian was talking but muted.
I was just going to clarify that it would be the public hearing and the, in the resolution both versus just a public hearing. Is that correct, Arlene?
We adopt the resolution to participate tonight and then set a public hearing. And then in March, we have start with the meeting with the public hearing. And then there'll be another approval in the new business.
Right. Yep. So the motion needs to be that we're doing the adopted resolution and the public hearing both, I assume, correct?
Correct.
Yep. Okay.
Was that a second?
It is a second. I didn't hear the set the public hearing earlier, and I just wanted to verify that. So, okay.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
Okay, so there was a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next, approval of RFP for purchased services for IAT services.
So this recommendation, we have an opening for IT technician, and rather than have the district hire the person, talked it over with Sean and some of the pros and cons of hiring IT services as a purchase service. The reason why school districts would want to do this, the big reason is you would want to do this is it becomes as a purchase service, it becomes a capital expenditure. And so this is a model that I use in Dunkerton and Central City to kind of alleviate a little bit of the general fund, because it's not a salary you pay, you're purchasing the services. I operated with two different models on this. The Dunkerton model was we just purchased IT services, and the guy's name was Bob. And if you had a problem, you called Bob on your phone, and he remoted into your computer from Cedar Rapids and took care of it. But in Central City, we really wanted a person in our building because we were one-to-one building. We felt that, that person was important. And so we actually purchased our services through the AEA. And when we wrote up the RFP, we wrote in-person support. And so obviously we would want to have a person in the building. So Sean and I kind of worked on having it state that it would be a person in the building every day. And then Sean had this wonderful idea that, among other things, since we're writing an RFP for the services they would provide, that we would put the student information system as one of the requirements of their duties. And so
Power school.
Have them be the power school expert. And Sometimes I go on and on with my stories, and one of the things I had told Deshaun was in Central City, they had, the IT person did our track meets, because that was a piece of technology that was a special skill, and we wanted to put that in, and so I guess Sean took that information and said, why don't we have, instead of having them do our track meets, have them do our power school, so. And so we would put this out there and anybody could bid on it. After we got the bids, the board could decide if they wanted to go with the bids or if we wanted to, you know, if the bids aren't competitive or we don't get any, then we would go out to post the job. But I'll take a break from talking and Sean, do you have anything to add to?
This would be which schools?
High school and John Klein. West side a little bit, yeah. West side, I usually take care of West side. It'd be those two schools, you know, an in-person thing, that was one of the biggest topics we had, is it needs to be somebody here. You know, we talked about maybe splitting it and doing like a hybrid where there may be offsite part of the time and onsite, but that's not something we need. We need somebody here, to support our staff and students.
And currently, I don't know of too many companies around here that do in-person, on-site. Obviously, like the company in Cedar Rapids where Bob works, they could do the remote, but that's not what we want. But the AEA does for Eastern Alma Key currently. Do you know if are they doing on-site there or?
Yeah, their full-time, technology director is paid in this type of program there. I think there's like 6 schools in our conference or in our AEA pool. That are in that same kind of agreement. The thing that's a little scary about that right now is the whole reform of the AEA, because that's unknown. You know, it'd be super simple for us right now to be like, you know, AEA, we want you, but very unknown at this point.
And I'm wondering if we did put out an RFP for this, wanting services through the AEA. And let's say that the AEA has funding taken away and is completely restructured, and we don't receive a bid for services through the AEA. Could we still have the right to refuse bids that were submitted and change course and go back to posting this as a in-person position? I just want to know, like, what are, is it choose your own adventure, or are we painting ourselves into a corner?
No, that's good. That's a good question. I think we're talking about having it be for this school year. And we know the AAs will be solvent for this school year. And then, you know, that gets us to June and we see what happens with the AAs. And if they continue, we can still purchase the service. The ones who the RFP we like, then we can just continue with the AA. If it's not the AA and it's a computing company that I don't know of that said, yeah, we'll hire a person and have them be on site in school, then we can just continue with that. But yeah, we've thought about what happens if the AAs go away or don't exist in the same format that they do now. So that's why we would want this just to kind of get us through the end of the year. And that's kind of, I guess, our trial period as well.
Okay.
And there's verbiage in the RFP that states that you guys have the right to reject any bid for any reason.
Yeah.
And that's something you all put in every RFP.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
Right.
So
and you can,
go ahead, Sean.
Nope. And I was just gonna say, and you guys can accept any bid as well. It doesn't have to be the lowest price bid. But you have to have just reason when you choose a bid like that.
That's an important point, because some bids,
So a few years ago, we had a situation where we had some problems with our internet and other things. And prior to Sean being our person where he's at today, and our teachers were really, really upset with the school district, and we had to make some really big changes and get some stability back into our system. You know, I'm looking at this as we're talking about this to finish out the rest of the year and the contract from March until June. And I think what I'm hearing is we really want the AEA to do this. And if we don't have the AEA do it, you know, we might go somebody else and have somebody come into our building that through a vendor that we really don't know. And they're going to be in our building full time. And that scares me a little bit. So I doubt that the AEA has somebody sitting out there that's qualified to come in here March 1st and spend full time in our building. It's just hard for me to believe that they are, or probably anybody else would have somebody that's completely trained that we can bring in and be rock solid and make sure that we're getting the services that we're paying for. So it just seems to me that we've had a really good, we have a wonderful technology department, and it's worked really well for us. And just to try to shift some money from the general fund and management fund to make this work, it seems to me like we're putting a lot of risk out there that for something that's really important. We got probably over $1 million worth of computers, and I don't know how many devices we have in the district, but we're really trying to do some management general fund changes when we're putting ourselves at a lot of risk, I think, for something that's really important to all of our students and all of our staff. I personally, just be very candid, don't think it's a good idea. And even for us to train somebody, from March until June, it would be a lot of work, but we would be putting dollars into somebody that knows our particular situation on staff, that we are comfortable being around our students. And it just doesn't seem like we're going to a lot of work just to move some dollars around from some different funds. We're losing a lot of control. And Sean's going to have to manage that person no matter whether they're a staff member or not. But if they're a member of the AEA, for instance, Sean would still have to manage them through, even though they're employed and managed by somebody else. It just seems to be that there's quite a bit of, it just seems like we're going a lot of work to solve something that we've had in-house and probably should be in-house.
I wonder if having a staff person in-house is going to have the same qualifications and expertise as a contracted service might have.
Do we know if AEA has anyone in mind that would be able to do this? Have we reached out to the AEA at all yet and talked to them about that?
I have talked to them. They don't have a person currently. So they would be looking to find somebody for us. Their end goal is to find somebody for Decorah that's either in the area or wherever, because they don't have a person on staff that's waiting for a job. And then one of the first things we did right when the bill came out was we met with Stan, the AEA administrator, and we just asked him what his thoughts were. They're willing to work with us, but they can only work with us for sure until June 30th this year.
And would someone in our district interview that person, or would the AEA do all the interviewing and they would do all the hiring?
Being as we've not done this before, I don't want to speak for the AA, but we could put that into part of the process is our opportunity to vet the employee, whether it be through the interview process or before they're placed in our building. I mean, we're talking that the AA is going to hire the person, and we feel like that's probably the most likely candidate just because they do it at other places, but it could be a different place, but we would want the right of refusal to be able to say, we want to check out this employee. I mean, we're going to be in the same boat that the AA or any computer service company is going to be, is finding somebody with this expertise in this area that wants to work in Decorah. So I imagine that's the same pool of candidates. Whether how deep or shallow it is, I can't speak to that because I have not ever interviewed for this type of position before. So
the AEA doesn't know our systems in Decorah, right? So they're going to hire somebody that they're going to have to train, to be knowledgeable in not only IT in general, but then we're going to have them come in, and Sean's going to probably have to work with them to get to know some of our services and what we have at our building. Seems counterintuitive.
Well, I view this as a scenario. We have to do something. It's a question of what.
Right.
Either we send out this RFP, see what we, find, or just immediately move into hiring a position internally. I think the one thing we can't do is nothing. I don't see any risk in the RFP process. I guess the only possible downside is the time if we aren't satisfied with what comes back. But given that this is just a request for proposals, not a final decision that binds us to do anything, I have no concern with pursuing this route. But I would just, as I said, emphasize that doing nothing is not an option.
Sean, I know you're shouldering a lot of the burden at the moment. Just looking at some of the dates in here, what is your ability to continue to shoulder said burden over the coming? According to this, the request for proposal on February 21st, contract from March 1st. That seems like a very quick turnaround, but.
Yeah, I mean, we're working, when I say we, administration and the high school, high school, and John Klein are working with Shannon, who's our integrationist. She's kind of stepping in a little bit. I can't be in the building. And then Teresa's helping a lot from afar at the middle school. She's helping with repairs and different things, and we kind of set up this interop system that we worked out. And so as far as burden shouldering it's shared right now. It's not solely on me.
So if this is we're looking at a very temporary time period. So if we pursue this process, we go through we approve the RFP for police services. We contract the service out for the remainder of the current academic year. And let's say that we don't like it. And would it be possible I'm just wondering what the risk is of moving from a general fund staff person to a Pepple Save expense? Would it be possible if we decide this isn't the right route to go, could we move back?
Oh, sure. Yeah,
To general
yeah,
fund.
there's not, I think Ron probably said it the best. The only thing that we lose on this is time. And I suppose as much as I thought about it, tomorrow we could post for an, anticipated tech position and see what we get through that. Approve the RFP and see what we get through that, so that we have two options, so that we're not losing out on that time. You can post for anticipated jobs and get people to apply, and look and see what you get through the application process. Just because you post a job as anticipated, you're not required to hire somebody for it. Just kind of like with the RFP, we're not required to accept somebody, if only one person comes back with an RFP, we still have the right to say, we're not gonna work with, we don't like your RFP. So that would give us the maximum amount of flexibility on the shortest time frame. I guess now that I sit and ponder this, does that make sense?
Doing both at the same
Yeah,
time.
simultaneously doing both, understanding that we only are gonna do one. This doesn't mean Sean gets to hire a bunch of people and enter into a bunch of contracts.
So my question would be let's say that if it sounds to me like the preferred way, if we didn't do it in-house, if we go through the AEA, and they would have to hire somebody and train somebody and go through that process. I could see that easily being a month or two process before that person really gets up and running, and especially if they're somebody that's going to have some training that doesn't have a lot of qualifications. It just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. If we're going to put it out there and a job description for us to hire somebody at the same time we're putting RFP out there, is that really fair to the businesses that would take a look at this and try to put a schedule together, a payment schedule together, and then all of a sudden we an RFP out there, but also we find a candidate to be like and say, oh, sorry, we hired somebody. Doesn't seem like a real fair process.
I think Brian is making some excellent points. Because I think we probably have a bigger pool here in Decorah of someone who lives locally who would take this job for a short term than the AEA would have. I mean, I can't imagine that they'd find somebody who was in Ocator or somewhere who would want to travel here every day. I'm not really seeing
Kind
that.
of share something from my experience with knowing about shared positions with the ADA for social workers, school psychologists, that kind of stuff. We don't currently have that here, but our special ed directors in other districts in the surrounding areas. The AEA, yes, may hire them, but the district that they're working with is the one who is, I mean, day one, they're the ones that are on site in that building. I can think of a social worker that used to work for us, or she's an AEA staff, but she's shared now with MFL, and she's in their buildings regularly, knowing their system. The AEA didn't train her on how to be a social worker in MFL's building. If that helps clarify, I wouldn't anticipate that being, like, the AEA is gonna train them on technology stuff before they would start in our building. I think we would be the ones that would be in control of that.
Yeah, most likely, we're gonna have to train the person, whoever the employer is. Unless they don't need
One point
anything.
for personal privilege here. To paint a picture for you guys of need, to Ron's point, last week, we're getting ready for max testing on Thursday and Friday, and we had to upgrade a significant number of our 9th through 11th grade computers to operating system 14 for our max. If you would have walked into our main office during the day, you would have seen Denise, Jim, Shannon, Allison Lovestone, Joel Rollinger, all hands on deck, upgrading our computers in the office so that we could do maps testing. So time is certainly of the essence. Thankfully, we've got a great staff and everybody leaned into that, but definitely was a lot of work by a lot of people to get our computers ready for map testing this week.
And that's a gap we don't want much longer.
So in the conversation with AEA, is it your impression that it would be more efficient for getting someone faster doing it this way than advertising ourselves?
I mean, can I guarantee which way is the faster? No, we could look at those timeframes and say, we want RFPs faster than February 21st, because we want to start faster than that. With the district, we have to post at least for 10 days. But I think I think we're drawing from the same pool, whether we're the employer, whether the AA or whether there's a different technology. Maybe the only other thing is the AA might have somebody that they could deploy on an existing employee, not full time, but they could deploy on as needed. We had good luck with the AA in Cedar Rapids because we would use them a lot in the summertime, and they would say, we're gonna deploy, but they had a bigger bank of tech people. They might deploy 3 people to our building to do a project, knowing that that there might be a week where they didn't deploy anybody because they were then on a different building. So to Brad's point, if we'd had something like that in an arrangement, we could have said, hey, we don't got to get these computers updated. And again, Keystone AA is a smaller AA than Grantwood, so I don't want to overcommit and just say, oh, they would have done it, but that might have been a resource from them. And we've talked to them just because they're the one that we know does it in other buildings. So I don't know, Sean, if you have any insights on that.
I mean, they don't have the resources at the whim of disposal right now. I can tell you that. That was the one comment right away. They were like, well, we got to find somebody. They used to have kind of an on-call person that was in that situation where a school district called that, hey, I need somebody, and then they could deploy them, and it was just an hourly rate on the district. There was no contract, it was just as needed. But that person, in this sense, retired, and they didn't fill that position.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I could have viewed it as analogous to if I'm going hunting and I got my hunting dog, I'd rather have 2 dogs scaring up birds than 1. Whichever one gets the biggest pheasant, the fastest, great.
Sean, are you willing to train an employee of AEA that they hire but you train them, or is that even possible? I mean, it kind of seemed like, and I know that the social workers are different things. They're degreed and they've got, the social workers and they're certified and all those type things, but this, I just can't imagine, that Sean wouldn't rather have, I'll ask you, Sean, would you rather have somebody on your staff working under you that you train, or would you rather have somebody from AEA that they hire that you end up having to train, even though they're not part of your staff?
I mean, either way, I would be doing the training for this person. Longevity, the hope and goal would be this person would be here for a long time. And that we don't have to continually train people over and over again. And that's kind of, where we want somebody on site who's a named person who people know, who can say, hey, I'm going to Tim because he's going to fix my computer. We want that person. So if it's an ADA person or an outside person, it's just a matter of getting them here and trained on how we function and moving from there. It's all qualifications on, are they a tech person that knows a lot about tech stuff? Or are they a tech person that knows just a little bit and needs a little help getting past that? Those are things that I've done in the past. In previous districts, I hired paras, office people to be tech people, and it's all about training them.
I guess I don't see any danger in doing both. I know, Brian, you expressed concern about maybe not being completely honest, or just having some concern about having a call for RFPs at the same time that what was the word that you used? Anticipated.
Posted an anticipated opening.
Anticipated opening. I think that's a creative solution to see what's out there. And I want to support our local AEAs as much as I can. I think this is a good way to see, if anything's possible through that, or at the same time, gauge public interest in our region.
I think it works either way. Whether we go with an RFP and they bring somebody in and the AAs are gone, we can always hire that person to be the employee next year, or vice versa. I guess, if we hire the employee and the AA is still there, we could say to the AA, oh, we'd like to go on an RFP. By the way, Ron would make a very good candidate. We'd give our highest recommendation. Might be a little easier to do the RFP. But then, of course, that's my recommendation.
And again, the agenda item is simply approval of the RFP. We're not hiring anyone tonight, or we're not making a final decision. We're just simply approving the RFP.
That's correct.
So we had one more question. Are we gonna send the RFP out to just the AEA or to others besides the AEA?
You'd send that out to anybody and everybody that we know.
Are you comfortable having some employee of a small computer firm come into your building that's not an AEA employee?
If we would choose that, if we would choose that company, we like their RFP, and we had a chance to vet their employee, I would say yes.
Okay.
I see the point Brian's getting at with data security, and where having it housed externally versus internally could very easily be a challenge, to say the least. I don't see the hurt in also posting it ourselves, in the more traditional sense, much like I think Brian's advocating for. Maybe we're going with the two stones for one bird metaphor here, but I do see some of the reservations, and I can agree with them as well.
But I know that it might not be our first choice to subcontract through an external IT company, but this is not we're not pioneering a new way for schools. There are lots of schools that do this in the state of Iowa. It's not new. It might be new to us, but yes, I'm concerned about who is in the buildings, absolutely, but I'm not concerned about data security with an IT company. I think that they're held to, I mean, that's their business, is to manage data or manage IT support services in a way that would fulfill their contract, so.
And I would just kind of remind everyone, and maybe Sean could speak to, just because they work in IT doesn't mean they have access to all our systems and networks. That's reserved for, ironically enough, Sean and the lady at the AEA as a backup.
Okay.
So.
Yep, I said it the other day when I was talking to a couple different people, you know, it's like a master key set. Every building's got their own master key. You know, the IT people, that are in the buildings, like Teresa, she has passwords that Justin doesn't have. But she also knows that, and that's how that works, but it's also interchangeable. It's part of the security thing and confidentiality.
There could be some other risks, having a non-employee, full-time contracted employee of the building. There are other risks other than just security into the software, or into that as well, but so.
Okay, so the item on the agenda tonight is approval of the RFP, so I'll wait to see if there's a motion or not.
Well, I still appreciate the two-dog approach, so I'll make a motion to authorize the RFP simultaneously with placing an ad.
I'll second the motion, as Ron said.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I don't know. I mean, I think Brian is making some really great points. I mean, this person is going to be working directly with students, and I mean, I don't feel really comfortable with someone else and doing the interviewing. And this RFP, Sean would be doing interviewing, right?
We could put that into the RFP, absolutely. To be involved in the process.
I would assume that a non AEA company, they wouldn't be hiring another employee. Well, maybe they would, or maybe we don't know if they'd be hiring another employee or have another employee on staff. So we may or not be involved in a interviewing process. Well, we wouldn't be, because another firm's not going to say you can interview my employee. I just don't think that's going to happen if it wouldn't be the AEA.
Maybe that's a good asterisk or reason to write it in that method, to not to keep Bob's tech service out, but potentially to lean harder towards the AEA versus other organizations.
But I assume it would be, maybe it's not an assumption, we make it explicit, that anyone the AEA is gonna hire would have to undergo the same background check that they would have to undergo for us to hire.
Yes.
They're not just, taking people off the street.
That's correct. So we would certainly we'd be involved in either the interview or the vetting process, because to Brian's point, we couldn't always guarantee that it was going to be someone that would be a new hire. And then they would pass background checks that we require at the school district for people to be in working with their children.
And again, we're going through all this whole process just to be able to get money transferred from one fund to the other. Is that worth it? That's where I'm at. When we could hire an employee and have them for 20 years and they know our services inside out. But I'm done talking. It just seems a lot to me. We're doing a lot of work for something that I'm not too sure how much what we get out of it from the different fund management fund and general fund savings. But money's still money, because we're still paying them the same amount of money whether it comes out of either fund.
Yeah, money is money. I know, Brian, we've discussed that, and I would say anytime I've got an opportunity to look at ways to move money off the general fund, I will. But I can appreciate your points. This is, 3 to 4 month fix. But I guess I look at it as also an opportunity to try something out for 3 or 4 months.
Hey, Darlene, may I ask you a question, a process question? We've had a motion and a second and further discussion. So does that immediately go to vote?
Whenever you close the discussion.
Yep.
Unless somebody might make another motion.
Okay,
Well, we have to
It
resolve
just
the first motion
Yeah.
before another one can be made.
Yeah, if you don't have votes or if it dies, but you could take a vote.
okay,
Yeah, since there was a second,
That's correct.
yeah,
there was. a vote on it.
yeah, okay. Do you mind repeating your motion, Ron, for, just for, or since we've had a lot of discussion?
That we simultaneously pursue posting a position on the, whatever it's called with the state of Iowa at this point, and posting the RFP.
Okay, and there was a second to that motion.
I will continue to second, the 2 stones for 1 bird approach.
And discussion is closed. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Okay. Motion carries. So we will place both as discussed. Okay, next, approval of engineer or architect for the middle school roof project.
Yeah, so we got 3 very, good bids. They're all very close in, cost. 2 were more flat fee bids and 1 was a percentage bid. Greg and I, we're not wagering on this, but Greg says a number closer to 800,000 and Tim says a number closer to 1 million. Is that fair to say, Greg?
Yeah.
Okay. And so Nick Hildebrand's bid, and I think it's, the percent, I think we put it in 5.4% would be close to, maybe about, if it's 800,000, like 48,000 would be low, but it could also be more. I'll cut to the chase and say, I liked, Shive's bid and, Dan Levi architecture bid. I know Shive's a bigger company and has done this specific roof. I had a chance to do, reference checks, and then I had 1 more reference check call back. And I would say that Shive Hattery got glowing. Like, they went out of their way to say they're awesome. They save us money because they write plans that are so well, documented. That we get multiple people to bid on our projects because of working with Shive. Both companies cited the same employee at Shive, which was ironic because, his wife was on my school board at Central City, and I assumed that they included Stephen on the emails just to kind of, get him to, like, I was trying to ignore the fact that Stephen was on the emails because I didn't realize that he was a roofing expert. But Linmar and Iowa City both had wonderful things to say about his work. And coming from an insurance perspective, this employee of Shive, comes from, so they just said, not only does he design roofs, but he designs roofs that don't cause a problem. And if there is a problem, the Iowa City guy said, Stephen just takes care of it. He's the guy and he calls up and he catches the installer if they're not writing the specs that he did. So it sounded like a no-brainer, a worry-free process to go with Shive Hattery. Because they are roofing experts. Now, I spoke the whole time, Greg, and I know you came here specifically for this agenda item. So, I don't know if you want to add anything, but I thought you'd like that part, because I just talked to Iowa City after lunch today. And the guy went on and on about how how they actually have both Iowa City and Livermore have roof maintenance contracts with Shive, where they just walk around their roofs once a year, and it's kind of like you might have a maintenance system on your air conditioning or heating, so. But with regards to the problems that we've had with this roof, to all of a sudden go from the roof we have to a worry-free roof, sounded like a pretty ideal situation to me.
Dreamy. Greg,
Yeah.
can you share your opinion with us?
Any three of them. I'd be comfortable with any of them. No, seriously, I mean, and Shive is the lowest bid and the recommendations were good for, them as well, so.
And it's interesting, we walked on the roof with two of the three companies, and each time they kind of, well, I like the guy from Levi, he had some nice things, or good information that he brought. Now, the guy from Shive, if you remember that day, he was pointing out all sorts of stuff up there. Like he wanted to look at and so, but I would recommend we go with Shive, and we can over talk it, but if I'm presenting somebody that two big districts say worry-free roofs, I think that sounds awfully good for this district. And multiple bidders for the project. Like I said,
That was one thing with Levi, they only, they talked about potentially just two bids, so it'd be nice to.
now, both Iowa
Dave Henry
City,
had a, yep. Go ahead, Tim.
well, both Iowa City and Livermore about Shive Hattery said they have very specific plans that contractors like to bid on because they know exactly what they're gonna do. And Iowa City went out of the way to say, we get bids from Des Moines because they're so well done. And so, anyway, I could keep talking, but I feel like of all the recommendations I make to the board, this one is a pretty slam dunk.
When I looked at
Although-
Henry's background and specific roof consultants and people deal with roofs, by far they look like the standout firm. I agree.
Well, I'm no expert on roofing, but I like to listen to the people who are. And for that reason, I'll make a motion, we approve the proposal from Shive Hattery.
I'll second
I
it.
will-
There's a motion and a second. Any further questions or discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next is approval of the 2024-2025 school fees.
And these fees are just A through D, because those are the things that we need to get into the student registration system. I didn't take the other fees off just because we want to have a document where they all live, and as a reminder, what we pay subs and all that kind of stuff. All the fees stay the same for next year. Kind of reviewed this with Kathy. The only one that we changed was added $5 to the technology fee, with the idea that we would go ahead and purchase headphones for the devices, at least at the K-8 level, which would then prevent us from having to deal with putting it on a supply list or something like that. And we could be uniform and get a better price and get it taken care of. So,
That would be a positive thing.
yeah,
Absolutely.
It helps with interoperability.
Yes.
We're running into that a lot. so.
Yeah, great.
I move that we approve the listed 24-25 school fees, with the additional $5 for headphones.
I'll second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next is setting a budget hearing date for the 2024 and 2025 budget.
so we have a couple different pairs. We have to have two budget hearing dates. Kathy and I just kind of looked at, one is, I don't know if I can define, one is to notify the voters that we're gonna do a a levy, and then the next one is to actually approve the actual budget.
Yeah, the process now is we have to have the chief and county auditor our proposed tax rate to them by March 15th. They have to get a letter out to all their, property tax holders by the 25th. And then that's where it starts the 2 public hearings now, so people can come and talk to the different boards about the tax rate.
Okay.
So that being said, we would recommend that we would do the first public hearing, we like option B. The first public hearing at the board meeting on April 8th. And then we have to, we give it a week's time, and the Monday, April 15th, we could do that. Budget hearings tend to be pretty quick, but we could do that with, a noon meeting if it worked out for folks. And I guess there's flexibility in there. If that Monday doesn't work, we could do it on a Tuesday or Wednesday or something like that. We just knew we had a meeting on April 8th that we didn't want to miss that out on. And Kathy, the second meeting is going to be approving not only a public hearing, but an actual approval of the budget. So, just kind of keeping that in mind, but I don't know if people looked at their calendars or we just have to get this down, and this is going to require 2 meetings in April.
Well, I would, propose we do option B. Unless that's too taxing.
No,
On
that's,
tax day.
Should be worked.
Caught that wrong.
sorry, I wasn't playing along. I didn't know we were doing dad jokes and board jokes. So, and then option B, the taxing one, and then are we okay with having that, the 15th meeting be at noon that day? A lunch hour meeting?
Yes, and by
Yep.
lunch, that could be virtual.
And by lunch, that could be virtual.
Okay. Yeah,
Yes.
Okay,
does that have to be a vote?
that should be, we should complete that.
Okay,
So I have a motion.
Did you see?
Yeah, I'll make the motion to take option B.
I'll second option B.
okay, further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next is to discuss and possible action for a conference affiliation. And we met recently since our last regular board meeting and had a really robust discussion about the options of what was happening, trends with conferences statewide, what was happening specifically with the Northeast Iowa Conference, actions taken by 2 member schools of the Northeast Iowa Conference, and where that left us.
And where that left up. And so on the 31st, the city said we talked for maybe about an hour and a half, and we made a motion to send a letter of inquiry to the Upper Iowa Conference, suggesting that we would have a face-to-face discussion. The Upper Iowa Conference did meet last Tuesday, February 6th. At that time, they voted to accept Howard Winishek's application. They voted to extend invitations to New Hampton and Almaquee, and they also voted to not trying to think what the word was. They declined our opportunity to meet regarding our membership discussion. So to that point, we really need to find a conference, and not that we didn't need to before, but so I don't know, Adam, I can just cut to the chase. I think our first choice is still the Upper Iowa, and that we would write a letter of actual request to join their conference, that we would get to them, and then they would, I mean, they turned down our request to meet, but they haven't returned down our official application to the conference, because we haven't made that yet. So this is what we would be doing now. That's the brief version. I know, Adam, you're living and breathing this, so things you want to fill in or questions you want to answer?
I'd still say amongst within the community and a number of different places that even at the AD level, there's a lot of good dialogue, just not a lot of official dialogue. You know, since the meeting of last Tuesday, I did reach out and have contact with both Gene Berger at the Iowa Girls Union and meeting at the Athletic Association. just kind of discussing where some of the next steps are. They were very high on our decision to make sure that we sit down and have a meeting before we officially request that, knowing some different potential pieces could happen. But they did share with us that you can't get to any next steps until you are formally denied, which means you need to formally make a request to join work with us. Still continued support is in it. This is where our coaches, staff, and our community, or we feel there's some elements that this could be the best option, then that we still commit to that at this point.
Any questions for Dr. Cronin or Adam? Mr. Riley?
At this point, the Northeast Iowa Conference is still intact for next year.
That's correct. It'll compete with 5 schools. We have schedules that are put together with 5 schools for those sports that we have full membership.
And the other schools have all been, it's 25, 26. If everybody got accepted, even then, we would probably just still stay with a 5. If everybody had a place to go, we wouldn't end the conference a year early, because that would require a phenomenal amount of rescheduling.
We cannot do that right now. That would be,
yeah,
that cannot happen.
So tonight we need to,
We're gonna we would really like to make a motion to join a conference. Our recommendation is make a motion to apply to join a conference, and our recommendation is the Upper Iowa Conference.
I have very strong feelings about this. And I feel like there are 2 fatally flawed options for us to pursue. But I think the course of action that gives us the best chance of preserving as close to the status quo that we have right now is to pursue this. They are already, it was clear from day one that they already had all this planned out, split it into 2 divisions and be the large school and the big school. Magic, it's kind of like Kim Reynolds' AEA bill. It just happens to appear. Not that I'm bitter or anything. So if there's going to be a small school division and a large school division, the large school would look an awful lot like the Northeast Iowa Conference, except instead of having former Owine and Waverly, it would probably have North Fayette and MFL or whatever. It's not for us to say who else would be in the large school division, but this would lead to us being in the closest thing possible to what we've had. And that is clearly, I think, everyone's priority to, if we could wave a magic wand and preserve the NEIC, we absolutely would. So again, given the problems presented by either option, I support this approach because I think it is the best avenue to achieve all of our goals. The survey that we had great community feedback, and I think what was made clear with that is that people want to have something that is as close as possible to what we've had. So I'm not against the other option, but as I said, I think priority 1 has been to, keep as close to what we've had as possible, at least in my mind. And this is the best way to do that.
One thing to be clear within this, while there are some questions that could certainly be raised in relation to this being rushed, and we still have a strong desire to be able to sit down at the table to have a discussion with a number of the school. Time is of the essence, that we talked about in our last meeting as well. Ability for us to continue to at least act, knowing that there's some next steps when it comes time for that. I think it is imperative because there can be some dialogue that could come from this, as in, what do you mean you didn't get invited to a meeting and now you're gonna apply or seek actual membership? I want people to not be naive to the fact that by October, we've got to have an idea where we're gonna be at and the bureaucracy that can happen with some of this.
And there are steps that the ultimate mediators who would be addressing a denial would like to see happen, and that's what we're doing. We're kind of trying to follow a rule book that doesn't really exist.
To synthesize, I think what Ron is saying is that we move forward with applying for conference membership with the Upper Iowa Conference.
Indeed.
And I would second that motion.
Was that an official motion? So this
yes,
so
it
this item is a discussion with possible action.
I agree with Ron. It is, I think it's our most viable solution, and I think we should go forward as well.
Okay, so
I made a motion.
Seconded.
any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
And I would add to this, that was a small part of a much larger conversation. Again, reiterating, a week ago, we were, not even a week ago, the 31st, well, I guess a little over a week ago, we had a 90-minute meeting where we discussed this. And as I have talked to people, I've said, it's all on, our meetings are archived, so you can see our whole discussion and how we talked about travel distance and competitive play and what our hopes and desires. And there's, again, to what Ron said, any IC would be our first choice, but I think this is the next best thing. So if somebody would just see this portion to understand that we've had lots of discussions about this.
And I think it's fair to say that if we are in the large school division of the NEIC, our scheduling, or the Upper Iowa, our scheduling would probably be much different than it has been in the past. I don't think that we will be afraid of scheduling non-conference games against other opponents outside of the conference that would be more appropriate for our size.
Okay. Next is the superintendent's report.
Just kind of a reminder, the 24-hour lot and the dumpsters now belong to the school district. And we kind of had an agreement with the 24-hour lot and the fields that the city could use those as long as we didn't have construction going on. But I was asked about the dumpsters, and Travis is from the city is going to work with Winnebago County on finding a relocation spot for them. And we're being a good neighbor, and we're not like moving them or anything like that, but yeah, so, Greg stepped out, but we had snow the first day, and there was maybe some thought that, it wasn't gonna get plowed, and so it was our land, but we're like, well, we wouldn't plow it if we didn't have the dumpsters there, so we quickly negotiated that back with the city, like, you wanna leave the dumpsters there, you need to plow it, and they were good about that, they kind of overlooked that part. So Sunflower Daycare is nearing completion. As a school, we did have a conversation with the board about possibly moving our pre-kindergarten programs over there. We've had more internal discussions since then. Shanna's here, but I would just kind of summarize those by saying that it's probably it is our recommendation from administration that we just keep preschool at West Side. It's working. And while Sunflower is an intriguing opportunity, there was just probably some more barriers that the room was gonna have multi-use, and there was a couple other factors. So since we talked about that at the board, I bring it back to this board meeting just to kind of update the board where we're at. You probably saw that we continue to have stop arm violations, people passing our buses. And so we put out a note on that. We had 4 last week, like in the first 3 days. And so we're trying to advertise, among other things, it's very expensive to pass a park school bus. So we hope that slows that down, getting that word out. Sheriff Marks and Captain Tyne were very supportive that that's a problem that they see as well. So we sent out that joint letter. Facility committee, we did meet last Wednesday as well, on the same day or a week ago, Wednesday. Got the process started. John Burmeister, our financial person, shared with the group that we have the ability to borrow about $28.5 million to build a new school, which, I mean, you can do a search. $28.5 million doesn't buy what it used to, unfortunately. I did a quick search where, like, the Cedar Rapids thinks they're gonna replace their schools for about 20 million, or maybe Clear Creek's putting one in for 42 million. So it all kind of gets down to the amenities and whatnot. We're gonna kind of work with Nick and make sure that the facility committee has a vision and understands what their input will look like on the project, and then how that can flow into an informational campaign. So I don't know, Carol, if you have any other insights for that. Or Aaron, as you both attended.
I thought you summarized it quite well, Tim. We haven't gotten deep into the weeds beyond understanding the scope of what we will have to work with, and generally speaking, brainstorming the hopes and aspirations that we have for said building.
Yeah. It's too bad we got crunched for time,
Mhm.
because it would, I think it'd be nice to have the discussions about the layout of the facility and get the group's input that way. So,
Yeah, I think it's important to get the group's input and public input. I appreciated Brigida's input tonight to us here, and I think that we have a lot of expertise in our community in many different areas, and for us to find ways to get the input from them, I think is important for this feeling like a community building that everyone will support.
And the next meeting is coming up soon.
they're the last Wednesday of the month, so.
So
Couple more weeks.
it'll be a monthly recurring meeting.
Yeah.
For that group. Great.
That's the highlights of my report. Put a bunch of information about the different type of assisted animals if you want to read it.
Okay, and the financial report.
So instead of assistant animals, I'm gonna look at different kinds of funds here. So, our funds are doing just fine. Most of them are up. The ones that are down again are for the purchase that we did with the bus barn and the land from the city. And the debt service this year, if you take a look at that fund, that looks a little different than last year too, but right now our debt is going down, so we didn't have to bond as much, so. And that will change again next year too, because then I think another one drops off next year.
Yep, it's kind of a unique time, isn't it?
Yes.
Any questions for Kathy? Okay, we've reached the end of our robust agenda. I'll call the meeting adjourned.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Brian. Thank you, Brian.
Thanks for not telling us the weather.